All right, so last time I did a quick video on setting up your property lines. And so I just want to kind of talk through my next step, which would be sorting out the roads and sorting out the building itself. And so I like to do a lot of this with filled regions. And my rationale with filled regions is they're more of an object versus a line. So you can get information from them. So if we remember last time looking at our property lines, so I'm doing block D, so I have this North Street, I have this East Street, and I have this South Street. And our road is 35 meters and then 45 top and bottom. And then we have an 8-meter buffer. So I'm just going to draw a little filled region here. So we're going to go region. Again, you can do a lot of this with detail lines, but I kind of like the filled regions because, again, they're an object. So let's click the pick line button here. And we're going to draw an offset of 8 just for the edge of our roads. And I'm going to start using the terminology of streets because I think streets, roads, driveways, it all gets really confusing. So streets are being our streets outside of our property. Roads we're going to call, or roads or driveways are we're going to call what's on our property. So we have this 8-meter setback. Over on the side here, we have a 35-meter road. And sorry, I shouldn't have called that a setback. That's more of a buffer, I guess you could call it. And then we have 45 on the top and bottom. And these roads do continue. So I'm just going to draw, I think actually, do they continue? They do continue up here. So I'm just going to draw this one. Let's turn off our offset. Make that 0. And we're just going to extend this up and over. And then I'm going to just close off these lines here. And I'm just going to extend and just pull them over a little bit. And I'm just going to leave that a little bit artificial right now. And so that's what our building looks like in relationship to our street, or our property looks like in relationship to our street. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be a white filled region. So we're going to go click edit type here. We're going to find our solid black filled region. We're going to duplicate this and we're going to call it solid white. And we can just change this solid black area here to be solid white. Click OK. And that'll be solid white now. And then one other small thing you can do. So see how our road continues at the end of these lines? We could just grab those lines in particular and just make these lines invisible. And that way it'll look like the road just continues, but we don't really care what goes beyond there. So the next thing we want to do is our driveways on our property. But I think before we do our driveways, I think probably the most appropriate thing is to do our landscape strip. So I believe, and if I'm wrong, you can obviously alter this per your project, but our landscape strip is 3 meters on the sides of our property that are adjacent to a street. So we're going to essentially do the same concept. So I'm going to use pick line. And I'm going to do our first pick line as invisible because it's going to be under our property line. So I'm going to grab our first 3 lines here as invisible. Next thing I'm going to do is you're going to use the offset button here. And you could also do this just by drawing lines. So I could just click pick line as well. And we're just going to make this a thin line. And we're going to make an offset of 3 meters because that's our landscape strip. And so we'll just draw our 3-meter landscape strip all the way around here. And then the last part, I'm just going to hit the escape key twice, is we want to click change our offset back to 0. And we want to close up this landscape strip on each end. And right now we don't know where our driveways are going, so I'm just going to place our landscape strip fully across our property like so. And we have some intersection issues. So let's just go over here and fix that. So I'm going to click on the trim and extend button and trim that corner and go down here and trim that corner. And then we'll hit our check mark here. So that's our landscape strip. The next thing I'm going to do is our driveway around our building. But maybe before I do that, let's do our setback. And so the setbacks, the zoning bylaw basically says for this property that your front yard setback is the shorter line. And in this case, I'm just going to make it the south line. So let's make our setback this line. I'm not going to do this one as a filled region, but I will do this as a dashed line or hidden line. And we'll just use our pick line tool and we're going to do 6 meters. So 6 meters is our front yard setback. 6 meters is our side yard setback, and our interior or our exterior and interior. And then 12 meters is our rear yard setback. So we have our 12-meter setback there. I don't really like these lines being green, so let's quickly fix that. And at the same time, we're going to add a line type for building. So we're going to go to our Manage tab, and we're going to go to Additional Settings, Line Styles. And I'm going to change our hidden line to be just a black line. And we'll change our line here to be black as well. I don't know why it makes those green. And we're going to create a new type. I like to always name my types by the number of the line weight. So I'm going to type in 06. We're going to call this extra wide. And we're just going to click OK. And I'm just going to rename this to be 6. And I'm going to create another new line type. And I'm going to make I don't normally do this for every single thing, but for building outlines, I kind of like to. So I'm going to call this 06 extra wide. And I'm just going to call this building outline. And that way I just know that I have a separate line type for my building outline. Again, I don't do this for a lot of stuff. Another couple examples would be like vapor barriers, moisture barriers, air barriers. So I might have its own line type for those types of things. Setbacks, I usually have my own line type. I'm not going to do that right now, but I would for setbacks typically as well. Actually, you know what? Let's do that right now. Let's do 01 thin lines. And then I'm going to do 01 thin lines. And we'll call this zoning. And instead of a solid line, let's make this a dash. Yeah, let's just make this a dash 2 millimeters. And I'm gonna actually maybe make this slightly gray. So maybe we'll make this 100 gray. So I like to use the numbers. So I'll do 100, 100, 100 for the gray. And it's a bit of a darker gray. And that way we have its own line type and it shows up a little bit differently. So I just need to click these lines, and I hover over one line, I hit the tab button, it'll select all lines, and then I click my mouse and it'll select all 4 of those lines. And we can just change that to be our 01 zoning. And the one thing I like about that is now when we go to select, sorry, I'm gonna pin that actually, so I don't move it. But now when we go to select this and I go to filter, I'll have my zoning lines as its own line type. So now that we have our zoning lines there, again, those zoning lines are invisible lines. They don't really matter. But we do have we now can actually start drawing our driveway. And I'm going to do my driveway as a filled region as well. Again, you can use detail lines, but I like filled regions because they're an object and we can have control over what those lines do. So back here, we could say back here that maybe we'll use this left line for parking. Doesn't really matter which line you use. We could also use this line. So let's just say that we're going to use this side and this side for parking. And so I'm going to bring my parking in from that a little bit. So the parking is around 6 meters. So I'm going to say 6 meters for parking. So let's do an offset line of 6 meters. So we'll write 6. We'll offset in 6 meters. We're going to offset in 6 meters there. And then over here, now we can offset from our landscape line and our landscape line. And then we'll offset this side here and here as well. And so I'm just going to offset this one back the other direction if it lets me. No, it won't. I'm just going to manually draw this one. So I'm just going to manually draw this line down here. And I'm going to turn off my offset. And this will make a little bit of sense in a second. I'm going to hit the tab button to see if I can get this corner here. And hit the tab button over here. And so now we have these kind of boxes going around here. I do need to fix this top corner. So I want my my road to go there. And then I actually do want my road to continue off here because that would be where my driveway would be. So I'm going to maybe do one driveway top and bottom. I think for me, when I'm doing a property like this, I would probably make it in one line like that because if you think about transport trucks, if they have to turn more, it kind of sucks. So I try to minimize turning by having those driveways aligned. Again, you don't have to do that, but I think it's a nice thing to do for the drivers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this line right here. And then I'm going to add a break line in the middle here, I think. I think that's the only place I have to do it. So now I can trim and extend these lines like that. And then we do the same down here. We can add a break line. And we can trim and extend those lines. And we just have to add a clothesline down here, like so. And now that I have this line here, I'm just going to drag this down all the way to our street. So our driveway is going to connect to our street. And I'll do the same up here. And if you want to add a little bit of extra, so if you remember, this is 8 meters. And if you remember, our radius that we want for corners will be 6 eventually. This is obviously a preliminary site plan, so it's not super important. But if we wanted to add a radius out here, I'm just going to go up 2 meters and I'm going to place a line. I did that wrong. Let's do that again. So I'll just draw up to get to 2 meters. And then I'm going to use this radius button here. And the way this works is based on a start and end point. And I'm just going to draw a 45-degree line until it locks like that. And we can then delete this little line and pull this one down. So it locks like so. And before I adjust this line, I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to fill it, or sorry, mirror over to the other side. And I can trim this one out here. And maybe it won't let me do that, but we can manually bring this over. And again, I'm just holding the tab button on my keyboard until that square comes up. And then again, I can trim this line down to the other side. So let's just copy that down. It might not go in the right spot, but what I'll do is I'll just move this up now. And then we can just connect these lines in. And again, the trim and extend may or may not work. I don't know why it's not working, but and we just use our tab button to find that. So there we go. We have our driveway. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click Edit Type. And Edit Type over here. And instead of doing our solid white, let's do a new one. We'll call it solid gray. Oh, solid gray. And did I duplicate? Yeah, I did duplicate. Okay. And then I'm just going to do again a gray color. I like to again use colors of gray because it gives you a little bit more control. But I'm going to use 240, 240, 240. Reason why is it's a very, very light gray. So it's almost white, but it just adds a little bit of color to your site plans. So we'll do that. And now that we have this driveway here, we can take our landscape strip, which we actually did not change. So let's actually do that quickly. So let's duplicate this. We'll call this landscape strip. And we can change our pattern to be a different pattern. So let's change this to be our vegetation pattern. Maybe there's under modeled. Or maybe we need to bring one in. So I actually don't have a landscape one in here. But maybe we'll just do a diagonal hatch for now. Let's do yeah, I'll just do this masonry hatch. Doesn't really matter for now. You could also do a cross hatch. The other thing I like to do with a lot of my hatches is I'll make them gray instead of black. And it just kind of lightens them up a little bit and allows the drawing to pop a little bit more. So let's make this landscape hatch a more of a medium gray. Let's go to like 180, 180, 180. And again, it'll be there, but it won't be as prominent in your view. And then we could also just adjust this landscape strip so that it stops over here and then starts again on this side. And then I'm just going to grab these two lines and make these two invisible so they kind of hide underneath our property lines. So there you go. You have your property lines. I mentioned that you want your property lines to pop a little bit, so we can go to VG on the keyboard and we can go down to, I'm just going to hit S on the keyboard for site, and we'll make our property lines a line weight of 10. That'll make them pop. And then the last part of this is now we can add our building outline, which will just be inside of this square here. And that will be our 06 building outline. And we'll click our check mark. And this one we can make a solid gray as well. So let's make this solid gray. And what I'll do when I'm doing the colors, I'll start to do solid gray. Let's call this 200. So it'll be a little bit darker than our road basically. And we'll make this a 200 gray. So red 200, green 200, blue 200. Click OK. And we'll make this solid fill gray, or solid fill, yeah. And click OK. And so there we go. We've got our building outline, we've got our street, we've got our landscape strip, and then last one would be parking. So I'll maybe do parking. I'll just place one parking spot for now. But the one advantage of doing this as filled regions is we have our site area, our building area right now. And so we can use that to calculate our the amount of parking spots needed. So we need 5%, I believe, of that area. So now we can just calculate that based on that. So yeah, and then your parking spaces are under component, and we have parking. You might need to change the size of these parking spots. I'm going to just place them for now. But the outline might, the zoning bylaw might have a bit of a different size. So you want to verify that this 2.4 by 4 by 8 matches the bylaw. If it doesn't, you want to modify it to match the bylaw. And then the last thing I'll just show you quickly on parking is you can use the array tool. We're going to place our first click right here and our second click in the middle of that line. And then we can use the array tool and we can just type like 25 or something like that. And it'll add parking spots all the way across there. So you can do that in both spots, basically. So that's parking and some site stuff. I'm going to leave that video there. But that's how to kind of get started with this site. There's certainly more detail and more intricacies you can add, but that at least will get you started.